The deadly and dreaded noise campaign. You can't get away from it. You have to learn how to deal with it. And it's part of an equation. Yep, it's one of the Gangstalker's favorite tools. The old noise campaign. It doesn't matter whether it's construction workers, sirens, strangers that show up out of the blue and start making noise, a cantankerous neighbor, the dog across the alley. And, it really fits in to that sensitization process because it's not just about noise. A lot of this stuff, well, it seems synchronized to the targeted individual. And that goes into, spiritual influences, in my opinion, because I've seen that. And that's really freaky. But, just stepping back and looking at it from kind of a bird's eye view, it all fits into an equation, okay? It's not just car doors slamming or dogs barking or, other types of things that are just kind of, intruding into your space. A lot of it is, synchronized with a lot of different things. I've talked about people having days off or trying to go to sleep or whatever. And I've made videos in the past, I think I erased most of those, where some targeted individuals, they will deal with those, when it's involving an apartment complex or something like that, or maybe people that have, had their dwelling infiltrated, things might be installed. They'll do that. They will install devices. There's all kinds of little, things that could be, used to where you actually hear people talking or something, and you can put those in vents and stuff like that. I remember when I was at the hospital, detoxifying from a lot of those tranquilizers. There was an old lady there, and she was really cool, and we hung out. There was actually several old people there, and she came up to me one day and she said, I'm really disturbed. I said, well, what's going on? And she goes, well, I'm having hallucinations. And I said, really? I said, what are you talking about? She goes, well, I'm hearing music. I said, wow. I said, what happened? She said, well, I was laying in my room, and I was right next to the vent, and I could hear music, literally. I mean, it was just as plain as day, she said. And I said, well, wait a minute. I said, she goes, no, it's okay. And I said, well, yeah, are you sure? And she said, well, there is no music here. And I said, yes, there is. And she goes, what do you mean? And this is after she already talked to her doctor about all this stuff, right? And I said, well, that dude in the room next to you checked out the little, boom box, and he was listening to it. And I bet dimes to dollars that it was right next to the damn vent. And it probably, oh, are you serious? I said, yeah. And so we actually figured out that it was the radio, coming off the little, stereo the dude checked out of the main office. And it's pretty funny. But there are devices that, you can do that with. And there's other things that can be done. Things can be installed. It's kind of like being harassed with, energy weapons and stuff like that. It's tactical. But, some of the types of synchronicity that people are dealing with just boggles their minds. I was watching a guy's video, and he was talking about how perfectly that people are sensitized. And, he is right. Because I think that a lot of this stuff is spiritual, right? There's really no other way. And I've talked about how, when you get into the biblical information, however that works, whether they are calculating things out like master mathematicians, or whether they have a window into the cause and effect that's going to happen, or maybe they are looking at things, from a different time perspective. The spiritual dimension they have things planned out, however that works. And all these things fit together in the menagerie of harassment. Times of the day, different activities can be correlated with these attacks as well. I heard one guy's testimony to where it was pretty freaky, and I've seen stuff like this too, where he would move to a certain part of his dwelling, his apartment. He might go into the bathroom, right? He wouldn't hear anything. It'd be, pretty relatively quiet. It started out with that because it always has a beginning point, and then it kind of expands out from that. And then everything was normal until he went in there. And as soon as he would sit down in the toilet, somebody would bang on the wall, boom, And, it's just, but, there's a lot of things that go along with that. And he said it never happened at first until he'd go in there and go to the bathroom, and somebody would do that every time, every single time. And of course, at that point, you're wondering is, well, how do they know? How do they know I'm in here? How do they? And he said he was real quiet too. He kind of like tiptoe, because he was assuming people could hear him walking around. Maybe the boards and the floor were creaking or something. There's got to be a way, and then you really start getting paranoid, because you're wondering if somebody's got a damn camera in your bathroom, or something. And then he said that it moved out to where he was, eating, or he was, in a certain part of his house, and bam, they hit the wall, or whatever. And that's part of that equation, because you do have to start to anticipate these things, whatever they are. I don't care whether it's, people slamming their car doors, car alarms, sirens, when you're in that heightened state of anxiety. A lot of people, might talk about aerial vehicles. When they start to get that narrative in their mind, they might start thinking about things that stress them out, and it'll culminate into, kind of a type of chaotic event where things around them are just going haywire. Dogs will start barking suddenly, maybe off in the distance, and things around them will just get crazy. Neighbors will start yelling and fighting. If they're in a store, people will be, running by them and talking loudly. Kids will be screaming, and then whatever, is on that list of things that kind of torment them, they've been sensitized to, then they'll have to experience. The siren will come by, in the midst of the chaos, or whatever, or that car alarm will, hit right at the point where they're at that heightened state, that crescendo effect of anxiety with that narrative. And I think that stuff is spiritual. I think there's a lot of MOs for this stuff too, because I've noticed that, vents and things like that they will be used a lot for a lot of different things. They'll use those for little types of, surveillance. They might get those, because you can get screws that are Wi-Fi, and you just take out whatever it is, like if you got like an air vent or something, or maybe a wall socket, and you replace it with one of these screws. They got little tiny pinhole cameras in them, so you don't even know they're there. People are looking for cameras, and there's nothing. It's actually one of the screws, in the, maybe the vent in your bathroom or something like that. But they will use those things. But the thing is, as I've heard a lot of other testimonies too, that demons and stuff like that have, had kind of a reputation for using those, types of scenarios as well, vents or whatever. How, like when you're a little kid, you're worried about the basement. It seems like you get that weird feeling, and some of that's explainable because you're, it's just creepy looking, or it's dark, it might smell weird or whatever, and you're alone and you got to go down the stairs. And some of it's explainable, but not always. And some of that stuff is spiritual. And so, you have to look at that too. I've heard of people hearing things coming out of vents. Then I don't think there was electronic devices. I think it's just something that they do. And you got to remember that people, when they're harassed, I don't care what it is, okay, they don't just go crazy. They're not just, having some type of brain dysfunction. These things, in my opinion, are propagated by the spiritual realm. For whatever reason, we don't understand all that stuff. We don't understand why some people are born crippled. We don't understand why some people, are born with different levels of intelligence and stuff like that. But, there are afflictions. And I think that this is one of them. And I think when people, have to deal with stuff like that, whether it's synchronicities, whether it's, these different types of attacks or whatever, I think it's an affliction, and I think that it comes from them. I think it comes from the spiritual realm, and there are different MOs for that kind of thing. That's always kind of, I don't know. Ben, I thought it was very interesting. A lot of people that have been diagnosed with schizophrenia and, different things like that, they have a tendency to hear things coming out of vents and stuff like that. They'll also, and I've seen this one pulled off too, that there might be a device like a fan or an air conditioner, something that makes a sound that is kind of, electronic, or it hums in a certain way, and it has a kind of a repetitive pattern to it, maybe. And what happens is they'll start to kind of interject with that. I had a buddy that, he literally attacked some of the devices that were in his house. Okay. And, at first everybody's like, what the hell's wrong with you, man? And this guy gets attacked spiritually all the time. And, he was diagnosed with schizophrenia, but, he said these things were talking to him. Right. And so that just sounds crazy. But I've noticed that, and I've looked into case studies, and I've looked into a lot of these things, and it always involves either things like vents, or it involves things that make sounds like fans or air conditioners. And what happens is you have kind of repetitive noise that goes with it. And in my opinion, what they're doing, and that it usually, people that are, experiencing maybe even chemical withdrawal or something like that can have stuff like this happen, to where, the mechanical repetitive noise that comes from a device is, kind of twisted around, it's like an audio sorcery effect that they will use. And, they will actually hear different, phrases and words in that mechanical, sound that's coming out of that. So, what I'm getting at is that you really have to, you look at the, how the spirit dimension can affect people, and how it is involved underneath in this equation, this assault into the mind of the target. The other element to take note of is that correlation or synchronization with moods, okay, whether it has to do with a heightened, state of anxiety or tension, or it may involve, something positive, where just when you started to enjoy yourself, or just when you started to relax, or right before you were ready to fall asleep, then you will experience that synchronized attack. And some of the audible things that people are dealing with aren't even really coming from their physical environment. I've heard of people talk about maybe hearing like loud bells or something, right as they're starting to fall asleep. You could almost even look at it as something like sleep paralysis or something, some type of phenomena. And I've had stuff like that happen to me. It hasn't happened in a while, but it doesn't even make sense. It's kind of freaky, and I think a lot of this stuff is spiritual, guys. And, you have to realize that. Be good to yourselves. Be safe.